Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings and another Frevisse piece. This one is another short story with an interesting background in the internet published book edition, I suppose you could call it, that I read in my excuse to do something short and easy that doesn't require much mental effort. I have once again read one of those. It's a short story, but since we're publishing as an ebook, I'm calling it an ebook. And it has an interesting story that Margaret Frazer puts in her notes at the back. The last couple of short stories didn't have notes, but this one did. And the note was, in effect, that in the 90s, several of Margaret Frazer's books had been published in German. They'd been translated, and a German-language Swiss magazine had asked her to write an exceedingly short, meaning 800 words, short story for their magazine, the idea being that they were putting out short stories to be read as commuter fare, something that you could, in effect, get on your subway or metro, whatever. If they call it something else in Switzerland, then whatever they call it in Switzerland. But you would be taking a short commuter trip and something that you could read in the course of a single short commuter trip from beginning to end and be finished with. Valid theoretical concept, but that meant it had to be really, really short. So Margaret Frazer settled in and wrote a short one, but as she puts it in her brief note, she sort of felt that it wasn't fleshed out enough, because the thing about writing only 800 words is that, especially when you're doing something like a murder mystery, or as she pointed out, something like historical fiction, you lack the space to describe things. You lack the space to world build. You lack the space, if you are writing a murder mystery, if you're doing only 800 words, you lack the space to drop in hints. You lack the space to really develop any characters. And so years later, when somebody asked her for a short story to add to an anthology, she came back to this and fleshed it back out again into The Stoneworker's Tale as we see here. She actually included at the end of this particular edition the original 800-word story that she had sent off to that Swiss magazine, so that's there too. And what you have in this story is an averted murder. The murderer attempted to kill a couple of young people who were hoping to get married, and this is one of those people who you look at and you say, wow, he has got to have something, that either there's something psychologically wrong with him or he's just worked himself around, because by the end of it, it becomes very, very clear that he has blamed the woman that he married for everything that went wrong in his life. And, when he goes off on his rants, his son, basically tells him several times, she died before your hands started to go. It's not her fault that your hands went. And you get the feeling from this that there is an expansion. It's implied that this older man who, used to be a sculptor, but when his hands went, couldn't do it anymore, that he may have made some choices because he had a family and there were risks that he couldn't take, travel that he couldn't go on, because, it's the Middle Ages. There are difficulties with getting your pay home if you just leave your family at home, and there are difficulties with bringing your family with you. And so there were things that he wasn't able to do, jobs that he wasn't able to take because he wound up getting married, and that he has mildly irrationally blamed his wife for the fact that there were things that he couldn't do, and possibly there were things that she talked him out of, based on the affection that the son apparently seems to have for this dead wife. Very possibly she cared deeply for her family and, took a more cautious view of things precisely because she understood the difficulties that come with, taking risks, that there are choices you make in life, and once you make those choices, there are other things that you can no longer do. My own parents had that issue that when my mother found out she was pregnant, my parents chose to have me, but it meant that they couldn't afford to do things like go traveling because children are expensive. And so you get the feeling, or at least I got the feeling in reading this short story, that there's a whole backstory of a man who resents what happened after he got married, and instead of accepting that his choices led to certain outcomes, and when you make a choice, you limit what other choices you can make. Every choice that you make has consequences, and sometimes those consequences take away opportunities or mean that you can't do things, and that he had decided not to accept the responsibility for his choices. And, it's particularly interesting because in the first part of this, the two murder victims, everybody's going on and on about how, they both seem to be responsible, and how could they make this choice, and it turned out they hadn't made this choice. The choice to vanish had been made for them by the guy who decided he was going to murder them. But also, he says a lot of stuff in it that makes it sound, in some ways, like going all the way back to that second novel, where, you have that mother who murdered both of her sons because she was convinced that if she killed them, that if she sort of had them say, I want God to forgive all of my sins, that she was like, okay, that's good enough, close enough to being shriven, and now I'm going to kill them, so that they can go straight to heaven and everything's great. And that his thoughts about them kind of reflect a similar sort of mentality, and it's a mentality that suggests a person who's got some serious psychological problems, that whether it's psychological or psychiatric, that they've got problems. Because, to say I am killing you because that will prevent you from suffering, when this is a person who is healthy and has a full life ahead of them, that, we're not talking about mercy killings, we're not talking about, somebody who is seriously medically ill and in constant pain and wants it to stop. We're talking about somebody who is, 20 years old and has a full life and full career ahead of him and is fully able-bodied and has no issues whatsoever, and to say, I'm going to kill you to keep you from suffering, that seems a little bit problematic. So, this is an interesting one. This is also one that was clearly written after Margaret Frazer had written her final novel of the series, because Frevisse in this one is prioress, which, if you may recall, Frevisse gets named prioress at the very end of the final novel of this series. So, I will admit, there's a part of me that is somewhat sorry that we didn't get to see Frevisse having to do, a little bit more stuff as prioress and having to solve a mystery as it might have been nice. If nothing else, it might have been nice to see what happened when Frevisse had at least as much authority as being a prioress gives her, because having the additional authority would be probably something she would have very much liked if the way she ran roughshod all over everybody in, the last story went would have been probably very gratifying for her, frankly. So, yeah, I've completely spoiled this, and I'm not sorry at all, because this is an all-spoiler zone, because, like, I don't really like the idea of trying to not spoil people, because if you're trying to talk about something, being cagey about it it's a little ridiculous to me, because you're not able to actually talk about it. So, and anyways, I tend to read books for watching the details of character interactions and things, and so I don't even really care if it gives away what the answer to the mystery is. But anyways, I actually don't have all that much else to say, other than it's very nice in this one to see Frevisse and her cousin Alice getting along again, that they sort of, in this book, appear to have managed to put some distance between the issues that they had in the various novels, due to Alice's ex or former husband's various machinations and his generally being a horrible person. It's really, really nice, because earlier on, Alice and Frevisse in this series, they sort of really, really clicked together as two intelligent women who had chosen very, very different paths in life, but who both kind of each got the other. It was sort of I understand and respect the choices that you've made, and understand and respect the intellect of this person. And so it's kind of hard in the novels watching as they sort of fall gradually apart, and as Alice becomes more and more cynical just in order to survive the things that are happening. So this was really, really nice to just watch the two of them, or read about, rather, the two of them getting along again and sort of clicking together well. And I think that's everything that I have to say about this, so I will see you all next week.